Hello, I'm Dr. Ron Bonstetter. I'm Senior Vice President of Research and Development for Target Training International. TTI is an assessment company that has over 30 years of building accurate and valid human behavior assessments, and they're distributed all over the world. Prior to coming to TTI, I was a professor and I studied the biology and chemistry of human decision making. The goal during this research was to try to pull back the curtain on the what and the how and expose the why behind our decision making. To expose those triggers, those hidden mindsets that literally dictate many of our visions and our productivity. I wanted to go beyond simply the symptoms and get to the root causes of behaviors. In the process, this transformation of assessments really turns a soft science into a hard science with repeatable evidence. In 2011, we opened up the Center for Applied Cognitive Research. We wanted to study the subconscious decision making using electroencephalograph and EEG. Our lab is equipped with BrainMaster technology, BrainMaster avatar technology, and we are able to, with this material, to capture real images from the brain in real time and see the activity of the brain as it's occurring. The original research that this is based on was really Dr. Richard Davidson. Davidson, back in the 80s and 90s, discovered that there was a shift or an asymmetry in the prefrontal cortex depending on the insights that a person was having or their state of mind or their mood. But back in the 80s and 90s, they really weren't looking at a full gamut of the EEG waves. With new technology, we're able to actually expose gamma, and in the process, we're looking at decisions that your brain is making within a 30th of a second of when they occur. These gamma activities in the prefrontal cortex are giving us some amazing images. I want to share with you 3 images that were used in the original patent that was delivered out of this research. Now keep in mind that the image that you're seeing, you literally are having an image with the brain looking at you. So the eyes would be looking at you, and you would be looking right at the front of the brain. The first of 3 different arrangements that you can get out of this asymmetry is a neutral response. In other words, once a stimulus is given, the brain doesn't seem to care. It just has sort of a neutral response in both hemispheres. On the other hand, if there's an acceptance, if they really like the concept, the brain then immediately at this gamma level will have a left prefrontal cortex lighting up. And in this case, the lighter blue indicates more activity coming out of the EEG. And the opposite is also true then with the avoidance. Here we see the right prefrontal cortex lighting up. The right prefrontal cortex is telling us that there's an avoidance. There's a rejection of the concept that's occurring. So we really are able to sort of group things into 3 concepts. We are using words or phrases that are given to the subject, and they decide instantaneously their feelings or their perception of these stimuli. Let's look at a few examples. Here's an example of a neutral response. Here we see activation on both sides. There's really no indication of a like or dislike. It's sort of a neutral response. On the other hand, here we have a left prefrontal cortex that's lit up. So we have a positive response to peaceful, tranquil. See, that left prefrontal cortex has greater red. The red indicates more gamma activity. While we're at it, let's look at a negative response. This is a negative response to the word obedient. And in this case, the right prefrontal cortex is lit, showing that this person has somewhat of a negative response to the concept that obedient describes them. Let's look at a couple of others. Here is an extremely negative response to the stimulus smoking. And in this case, I suppose you wouldn't be surprised to know that this individual does not smoke. Now, you might assume that everybody has this kind of brain activity when the word smoking is put in front of them. So we took a gentleman who actually is an avid smoker. And here is his reaction to smoking. Very, very different. Armed with these new tools, we began to have a number of experiments that we were running to see what we could learn. And I'm going to come back to this concept of the smoking, but keep in mind that the fact that this gentleman has such a positive response to the concept of smoking could become a problem if in fact he decided to stop smoking. Keep that in mind. Let's review this for a moment. What we have, again, is a series of statements or words about self that you mentally react to the stimulus. Each of the stimulus are on the screen for about 1.5 seconds, and we grab that gamma wave activity before the person is even actually aware of the thought. We are reading the subconscious response to the stimulus in about the same time that it takes to blink your eyes. Let's look at a few more findings that come from this. This is fascinating. When we have the individual hooked up to the EEG, we all know that you react very, very quickly to the concept of self. A sense of self is tied to your name, and your name really creates an immediate image as a result of that. Here is a subconscious reaction of a person's name being shown on a computer screen. So up on the screen comes your name, and here's your brain activity as a result. Notice the left prefrontal cortex completely lit up. You know your name. You're excited. Somebody called you out. On the other hand, let's see what happens if we put on the screen your name misspelled. Now look at the difference. We have a negative reaction here. We have the right prefrontal cortex is just flared. There's error. It's like an error message is just being dumped on you. Let's look at a couple other experiments and reactions that we found in the lab. We had a gentleman come in who was doing a number of other assessments. And along the way, at the end, we asked if there were some custom stimuli that they'd like to take a look at. And he said, actually, there is one. He said, I've been getting a lot of guff at home that I don't treat my biological children the same way that I treat my stepchildren. And it'd be fun just to see the brain reaction to that. So we went ahead in the process of the other stimuli. We intermixed a couple of other words. And in this particular case, what we stuck in were the children's names. Here, for example, is an image that comes from his brain when his daughter's name came onto the screen. Now what you see is a pretty positive reaction. There's also some thinking that's going on, but it's a pretty positive reaction. And so let's compare that to stepson. Stepson's name comes on, and what we see then is a great reduced response. A huge reduction in response. Now, this isn't grounds for divorce. This isn't all that shocking. On the other hand, it is telling, and it becomes a talking point. It becomes something now that we may want to address. It's sort of a red flag that may need further discussion. That's what we're seeing with a number of these things. When we saw this, we thought we really could help people who have maybe problems with concepts that are somewhat hidden triggers. So we started to work with professional athletes. And in particular, we brought in an athlete who was very, very good in her field. Keep in mind that in professional sports, a number of literature citations will indicate as much as 90% of these games are mental. And so the concept of mental in the top performers is a crucial concept. So what we wanted to do is see how they would react. And in this particular case, the phrase that jumped on the screen was, I deserve to win. We're going to show you a pre-scan and then 30 days later. Here's the pre-scan. And you can see this massive reaction to the concept, I deserve to win. It's almost like the brain throwing up. And when you analyze not just the visual, but the actual quantitative data out of this, it's a very negative response. Now, this is a person who's going to go out there and perform, and their brain is saying, I don't deserve to win. That's a problem. That's a potential red flag. This was given to the individual, and I would say, first of all, that when it comes to treatment, main part of the treatment that we're seeing emerging from this is the actual evidence. Because, you see, the coach had been telling her that this was a concern. But when she saw the image, it seemed to have much more validity than somebody giving their opinion. about her performance. So now we have a 30 days. The coach has worked with her, another coach worked with her. She's had time to contemplate what this is all about, and here's the image that we see in 30 days. She actually tells us that she's feeling better about self, and better about life, and better as an athlete. So there's sort of a win-win that comes out of this. Let's look at another interesting finding. We didn't really go out to try to find this, but it sort of happened. And I want to put this into a context. Recognize that if you go to the doctor and you say, I have a fever, the doctor is going to take your temperature. He's probably going to give you antibiotics. He's going to give you a series of blood tests that you have to take. All of these things in response to a symptom. On the other hand, if you come into the doctor and you say, I don't know, doc, I think I'm depressed. He's going to start asking you a series of questions, and you're going to fill out a survey. And as a result of the survey, they're going to then give you medication or counseling or whatever. I don't know about you, but that strikes me as being sort of medieval compared to the other kind of medicine we've had. We really don't know what's going on in the brain until modern technology has come up with some awesome tools. These new tools are exposing things that I think can really help us with the concept. So we need to find out what's going on. Here's an individual that actually was diagnosed with severe depression. What we find is a baseline activity level that's negative on every response. Every single response was negative for this person. The most positive, well, here's an example. They don't like fried food, so that was a really negative response, but everything was negative. On the other hand, let's take something that they absolutely love. They said that their favorite thing on earth for eating was chocolate chip cookies. That's as positive as they could get. The fact is that that's still a pretty negative response, but that's as positive as we got out of the entire test. We're starting to recognize that we can pull baseline information using this asymmetry to determine mindsets, how you feel about self, how you feel about life. All of this is very exciting. We have another assessment we've been playing with called the wellness assessment. In the wellness assessment, we have a series of questions that we try to get at what's really going on and how you feel about different concepts. We had an individual come in who was extremely well known in the sports world and was nationally recognized for her endeavors. Had a master's degree in nutrition, well-rounded individual. Again, we start to see a series of negative responses built around the concept of food. So up comes fresh fruit, and fresh fruit shows a negative response. Again, keep in mind, that's that right prefrontal cortex is being lit up. We then show her body fat, and we get another negative response to body fat. Then we turn the page, and we come to obese people. And we see this flare at the concept of obesity. Now, obviously, this is a person who is athletic themselves. This is a conscious concern for wellness. So to a certain extent, there may be an explanation. For example, the question was posed, tell me why you're sort of negative on fresh fruit. The comment is, any food in excess is bad. All right, that makes sense. And then we get over to obese people. And we're saying, yeah, but this is really a really negative response. Tell me more. And so we start digging a little bit. And of course, nobody really likes people to dig. And so here's the image. Can't hide from it. And the response is, well, when I was a kid, I used to be anorexic. No, her brain is still harboring the concept of anorexia. And it's in the subconscious. And she's living out her life in a way that actually allows her to maintain this hidden agenda and still come across in society as functional. So it's controlled. She's actually working with it and dealing with it, but it's still dictating much about who she is. So what's this have to do with me? What value does this have? Let's deal with a concept that I think all of us have addressed from time to time, called stress. And as a result, things happen in your brain under stress that literally changes the brain. Wouldn't it be cool if you could control that and actually come up with some mechanisms that allowed you to either reduce the stress or even eliminate it? So we brought in an individual whose claim to fame was that he was able to relax and focus. And in fact, he's another national coach that trains people in this technique of being able to relax and focus. So with that in mind, we tried to turn that into science. So if you take the concept of relax and focus and turn it into our technology and our vocabulary, what you would expect is a reduction in certain wavelengths and an increase in other wavelengths. So let's take a look at that and see if that's what happened. We had the gentleman hooked up with the EEG, and in 90 seconds we said, okay, do your thing. And so in 90 seconds we did a pre-post. Let's look at a couple of those pre-posts. Here is a very slow wave. Actually, delta is associated with sleep. Here we see a situation where he starts off with a delta. In 90 seconds, delta has greatly increased. A huge increase in delta in 90 seconds. Okay, that's good. Let's look at the next bit of evidence. Theta, same kind of thing. It's a relaxed wave. It's a thoughtful wave. It's a very, you're walking in the woods and you don't really have a thought in your mind and you're just very laid back. And here we see an increase again in 90 seconds in theta. Fine. Half that worked. Now let's see what happens though. Right now, if you're with me, hopefully you're using some alpha and some beta, little higher waves. So let's take a look at what happens to those. In 90 seconds, we go from the alpha, rather high, great reduction. He's starting to control this stress. He's getting rid of some thoughts. Same thing with beta, higher order thinking. He's reducing that. He's just eliminating those concepts. He's clearing his mind. So at this point, we definitely have evidence that he has relaxed. However, remember his statement, I teach people to relax and focus. So if we have to look at that a little closer, and the focus really should show up in the gamma, a high intensity wave that really is a focused wave. And as a result, we want to look at the pre-post. Here we have it. At the beginning, the great reduction in gamma, not too much gamma at all. 90 seconds later, tremendous increase in gamma. Relax and focus. It's sort of neat to see how that can be done. These are concepts that are going to become more important in the future. We hear people talking about relaxation activities, and many of us think it's sort of pseudoscience. Well, we're moving to the point where we can collect real data to really figure out what's going on. While we continue to work to understand and control our behaviors, what's really exciting is this new era of harnessing our thoughts. From our research, we are opening up new avenues. We're able to actually image the brain at the subconscious level. And when you expose that, you have things you can't ignore. Some of these images allow us to really dig into depression. They get us to dig into our mindsets and our hidden agendas that really have to be laid out on the table and dealt with to be all we can be. TTI is all about the power of self and discovery of self. With these tools, we're going beyond paper and pencil. We're going beyond surveys, and we're allowing the brain to speak to us, and we will be in control as a result of that in ways we could never imagine before.